how are you? Tell us what you've been working on.
I'm really good. You know, my main job from October to April, for the most part, is the color analyst for the Utah Jazz. So I get to travel around with the Utah Jazz team and talk about this young team that's trying to get to a point where they can compete for a championship. And so that takes up most of my time. But other than that, off season, even some during the season, I do a lot of inspirational speaking.
Yeah.
Mostly corporate and youth. And so I've been doing that for, over 30 years. Matter of fact, I think you were just a kid when I came to your junior high school. You shared the story with me.
That's right.
That's unbelievable.
That's right. Oh, yeah. I remember you coming to my school. It was awesome. Why is Utah? I've always found it interesting. Like, you came here as a player, as an NBA player. Did you know anything about Utah before you joined the Jazz?
Not much.
Okay.
No, I didn't know much. I had never been out west. I came out briefly during our NCAA championship run. We played in Ogden, and this was the last stop before the Final Four. We played University of Utah, University of Virginia. And I remember landing in Salt Lake City and just being, the mountains were breathtaking.
Yeah.
I'd never seen anything like it, being from DC, being from the city. And it was snowing that day. So I'd seen snow, but not in that kind of picturesque scenery. So that was my first taste. We moved on to the Final Four. So didn't get a chance to really see the city or get to know a lot of the people. But little did I know I'd be back really soon.
Yeah. And why have you stayed post-career?
Why have I stayed? Different reasons. Well, I married a girl from Utah.
That'll help.
Richfield, Utah.
Really?
Yeah. That's when I say that,
cool.
people are like, really? And it's true. I mean, people wonder, well, how can this guy from Washington, D.C. find his way to Richfield, Utah? Ended up marrying a cowgirl from Richfield. We both had basketball in common.
Okay. Very
So
cool.
that's one reason. The other reason is I just realized through sports, through basketball, through the Jazz, how much the people here, one, love their sports. But even more so, they love when the athletes are really entrenched in the community. And Jazz Nation was really, really good to me and still are.
Yeah.
Even post-career. But I just found that it was a place that kind of suited my personality, outdoors, kind of low key, family driven. And so even though I didn't play my full career here, I played 8 years here. Jazz traded me to Minnesota. I spent 3 years there, went over to Europe for 4 years, Greece and Italy. And then I came back here for my final year.
Yeah.
And I retired right after and went right into the broadcast booth. But Utah has just it's been an amazing place for me to just delve into the things that I wanted to do post-career, to raise my family, to meet the girl of my dreams, been married, again, 31 years. And
oh, wow. Congrats, man.
Thank you.
That's so cool.
So yeah, it's home for me. I still get back to DC. I have relatives there. Get back to North Carolina where some of my roots are as well. But yeah, Utah's home.
Let's dig into the current NBA stuff, because I know people will be tuning in a little bit just to get your thoughts on things, and then we'll go backwards from there.
Okay.
But all right. So this team, let's start with the Jazz. This team, interesting team. A lot of really young talent. Made some moves here at the trade deadline, helping Luka get to the Lakers, which is crazy. What did you think of the Luka thing?
I think
you ever seen anything like that?
Not in a long time. No, not really, because it was, for me, the trade was big, no doubt. But how it was kept so secret is unheard of in this day and age. Somebody's going to leak something right? With social media, you're going to read some rumors, but nothing. I mean, the players involved didn't even know. So I don't believe the Jazz knew until right up to a certain time of the trade. But definitely a blockbuster. And as a former player, you think, well, it had to be something more than just talent. And maybe we'll never know that. But I think both teams did okay. I think that Anthony Davis is a guy who, if he can stay healthy, which he's shown, he got hurt. He has a propensity, to get hurt,
which is crazy.
And on the other side, can Luka stay in good enough shape to compete for a championship? Those things are always part of the topic, but they're both great players.
And why do the Lakers always get so lucky, though? You got this 25-year-old superstar, probably a top 3 player in the league, no question, at least top 5, right? And so, and they get him for, it's incredible. They just seem to do it all the time.
Where do you go after LeBron?
Yeah.
Right. You got to be looking. You had to have started your conversations and thoughts to who's going to take that mantle, one of the greatest of all time. And I don't think Luka's a bad choice.
Yeah,
a lot of it's going to be, who is around him. But even at age 40, that's a pretty good combo. Luka and LeBron.
Oh, yeah. Who do you think the best team in the league is right now?
I've got to go with, it's a toss-up for me. Cleveland's just really astonished me how good they are.
Yeah, that was surprising.
Yeah.
How good they just shot out of the gate. Incredible.
Yeah, they have something. They got pretty much every position covered. And I think Oklahoma City, who I think is a model for a lot of young teams like ours. A team who can get lucky, because you have to with certain players. You have to see potential in your draft picks. But a team who has made it work by way of defense. Now, SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, is a great offensive player. But you look around him, you've got a bunch of guys who have really bought in to defense first. And they're making a lot of noise. They're knocking on the door.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's
really
incredible
to watch.
Both those teams, like the growth from just from last year is phenomenal and really cool. And obviously it's great to see Donovan do so well.
It is. Yeah.
Everything that he's doing out there in Cleveland. Where are we at as a team? Like, how are you looking? I mean, we're second worst record in the league right now. A lot of this feels intentional. You probably should do something like this. The NBA is a weird business where like you can kind of be mediocre for as long as you want, but if you want to get really good, you kind of have to be bad for a couple of years. It's really interesting. I mean, I don't know if you agree with that, but where are we at now, and what do you think like the next 2-3 years look like?
Well, when you have an organization that is handing the reins over to the young players, a lot of what you said is going to come naturally. You're going to meet some good teams, and some nights you're going to play well and surprise people, but most nights the better teams are going to win. Now, that being said, we have some really good veterans in the mix on this team. And I think it was Will Hardy that kind of coined the phrase, pups can't raise pups. And so you need those veterans to come in and help teach these young players how to win. At the same time, the veterans have to buy into this blueprint while still trying to raise their value, right? So John Collins and a Colin Sexton and a Jordan Clarkson, it's not easy to do as a vet, right? Because you've gotten to a point in your career where you want to win. You want to get to that next level. So it says a lot about those guys and them buying into an idea. But at the same time, what you look for, knowing what the blueprint is. And I think the biggest thing for me is that Danny and Justin haven't hid the fact that this is the blueprint of our team. This is what we're doing. So there's no surprises in the public. But at the same time, I really think that what you look for is progress. Do you see progress in these players that they're bringing on to this team? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, Isaiah Collier really turning into a pro right now. He's feeling it. He understands that he belongs here.
Mm-hmm.
And especially at that point guard position. You can't be an introvert. He was that way when he came in, and that's part of being a rookie in the NBA, kind of deer in the headlights.
Mm-hmm.
You got to prove yourself. All of a sudden, you find yourself standing in front of and guarding Steph Curry, right? So you got to grow up real fast. And I think when you see that progress, especially from my standpoint, it's like, okay, yeah, I get it. This kid can be really good. Al Filipowski has some things that can really help. Cody Williams, he's slight of body. He's not a muscular kid, but he's got a high IQ. There's some good things you look for if you know where to look. I know a lot of people focus on the losing because the name of the game is you want to be a winner. The players want to win. So it's been interesting from my point of view to be able to sit and call the games with Bowler Jack and look, you got to be honest, but you also have to talk about what you see, the young potential in this team and where you think it's headed.
Yeah, you knew Larry H. Miller.
I did.
What was he like?
He was as an NBA. First of all, when I came to the Jazz, Sam Battistone was the owner of the team. He had some other partners, but he was the majority owner. And as a rookie, I didn't know a lot about what was going on in the background. I just was so excited to be in the NBA, ready to get my feet on the ground and go to work. And I didn't know how much financial trouble the team was in. And all of a sudden, we're told that we're going to play some of our home games in Las Vegas. I don't know if you remember that.
No, people forget this. Yeah. I was too young, but I know that it was the history of that we played. Didn't we play half our games in Vegas?
Half our home games in Vegas.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. And part of that was because we were trying to get this new fan base. And I also think Sam Battistone was kind of testing the waters. There was talk about moving to Minnesota. So Larry H. Miller comes aboard my second year. John Stockton is drafted. And he purchases, I think it was like layaway almost, right? He didn't have all the money. So he put some money down and bought in to the ownership. And then the following season, he purchased the team. And what I realized about Larry H. Miller early on was that you never saw Larry without Gail. I don't know how many people really thought that was anything. I always did. Larry was a strong-minded, and you don't get where Larry Miller got to without being a shrewd businessman at times and a strong leader. But I think Larry was an intense leader. At that time, he was an unusual owner because right as I was going to warm up most games and going to work on my post moves, one of the first times I did this when he was owner, I felt an elbow in my back. And I turned around and it was Larry. Larry was in his Jazz gear and he was out there helping me warm up, bodying me up as a player. And I thought it was really strange to have an owner that hands-on, but he enjoyed it. He was really a breath of fresh air, I think, as far as ownership goes. The guy who was hands-on. Most owners were kind of, out of sight, out of mind until they needed to be. Even in losses sometimes. Jerry Sloan would be talking to us, ripping us, and all of a sudden, we called him the White Rhino. You could hear somebody coming down the hall, just cursing away. And so even before he got into the locker room, Jerry would step aside because we knew what was coming. It was Larry H. Miller coming into the locker room. And you thought Jerry laid us out. It wasn't anything compared to what Larry did. So he was a competitor. He was a winner. If you know anything about his history, he really started from humble beginnings and just worked his way to becoming a great leader. And Gail was just a great compliment to him, because I think most of his focus was on winning. His focus was on getting there and staying there and being the best. And there was a delicate side of him that was Gail. And I think Larry had a lot of that delicate side too, because he was a very emotional man. I don't know if he could finish a speech without crying. And so I remember when I was traded by the Jazz to Minnesota, that was just a devastating day for me. And come to find out, for a lot of Jazz fans, and even more so, I think it was for Larry. Larry wasn't at my press conference, but right after my press conference, Larry showed up in the hallway of the Salt Palace. Oh, it was Delta Center then, because that was the first year the Delta Center opened in 91, I believe. And Larry walked up to me, and he couldn't even speak right away. He was crying, and he thanked me for all my work and everything. And he couldn't even finish his statement. So I put my hand on his shoulder. I said, Larry, it's okay, man. I understand. I appreciate everything you've done for me. And so he was a great man. He really was. He was a guy that taught me a lot in the leadership category.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily all good. But when you are around leaders for long enough, you learn the things that will help you along the way, become a really good leader yourself. You learn the things that you probably shouldn't do in a certain situation. But that's their way, right? That's their way. They're effective leaders, and somehow they made it work.
You have had the privilege of, you being an incredible leader yourself, which I want to talk about, but you've had the privilege of being around insanely incredible, legendary leaders. Jimmy V. Oh my word. Tell us about him and your experience with him.
Every time I think of Jim Valvano, it's, and March is coming. So I really have to go to my freshman year at North Carolina State University when I earned a scholarship to play basketball there. I was recruited by then head coach, a guy named Norm Sloan. Norm Sloan was, he was a legendary basketball mind of the ACC. He had won a national championship with NC State in 1974 with a guy named David Thompson, Tommy Burleson, Monty Towell. Matter of fact, they broke UCLA's long championship streak by beating them in the first game of the Final Four, and then beat Marquette for the national championship. So when I was recruited by him and a lot of other coaches, they would come to your house, and my mom was from the South, so she didn't play. She had everything set up. She would feed them, and then after dinner, we would go. Dean Smith came to my house. He recruited me.
Wow. He
stopped recruiting me after he signed. He was recruiting James Worthy at the time and myself. So Worthy signed, so the recruiting was over for me for North Carolina. But John Thompson from Georgetown, right in my backyard, Lefty Driesell, University of Maryland, they all would come and sit down, and we go through the same routine. And my mom would always start with the question, if my son comes to your school, you're going to make sure he gets a great education, right? And they would always say, yes, ma'am, first priority. My mom would always follow up with, Coach, don't make me come down there, right? You can't go back on your word. Because my mom didn't play. Speaking of another great leader. And so I chose NC State, played under Coach Sloan for a year. And after my freshman year, he left, took a job at University of Florida. And when you're a young man being recruited by a coach, they're kind of your surrogate parent, right? They make these promises, and then you follow them, and they lead you. And so you've got these young men who are just in an uproar. We don't know what to do, right? The guys he recruited, there were several that wanted to follow him. There were some that didn't know what they were going to do. I was going to go home, called my mom. I said, Mom, Coach Sloan left, and I'm coming home. I'm going to quote my mom. She said, son, you may be going somewhere, but you ain't coming here. She said, you're going to stay there and get your education. First of all, you're going to stay until they hire someone else, and you're going to listen to him and see if you like him. If you don't, then we'll talk. Maybe you'll go somewhere else, but you're going to get your degree.
You're a great mom.
This is a strong Black woman who came up, who raised me in the 60s during the civil rights era. So education was priority to her and in our house. So I sat in a room with everybody else on my team, waiting to meet some guy that they found out in some college called Iona. And so he walks in, and you can read our body language right away. Our arms are crossed, eyes are down, because we didn't want to hear it. We didn't know this guy. He didn't recruit us. We didn't owe him anything. And he just stops after a second of pacing, and he says, hey, guys, I need you to look at me for a minute. I know you don't want to be here. I'm your new coach, Jimmy Valvano. He introduced himself. He said, I know you don't want to be here. I'm going to speak to you for the next 15, 20 minutes. He said, when I'm done, if you still want to leave, I will sign each and every one of your release forms. Wait, you mean that you're about to gamble maybe the possibility of losing all these players in 15 to 20 minutes? That's what I thought to myself. Like, that's kind of ballsy, right? And so he said, but I want you to look at me and listen to me. And the first thing he said was, I know that I'm going to win a national championship. He said it just like that. I know I'm going to win a national championship. I know the other guys may have felt it, but I thought it was selfish.
Interesting.
That's his first statement. I know. I mean, it's like, who do we think he is? Because the guy right down the street, Dean Smith, you know, he's got Sam Perkins, James Worthy, Brad Doherty. Oh, who's that other guy they had?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Michael Jordan.
Michael freaking Jordan, right? So he came in to me a little bit, as I thought of it back then, a little cocky. He said, guys, I know I'm going to win it. I know it's going to be soon. He said, if I can get you to see what I'm seeing, I dream about it. If I can get you to dream what I'm dreaming, I know we can do it soon. And I hope this is the team that does it. So he goes on for about 15, 20 more minutes. And the more he spoke, the more we just kind of sat up and listened. He was hooking us. It sounded really good, the picture he was painting. And when he was done, nobody left. And I think no one left because you were kind of afraid that you were going to miss something. I mean, he sold it that well that you didn't want to be the guy who, you know, who pulled the plug first and say, I'm out of here. So we stayed. And here's one of the first, because we had to get to know him. We didn't trust him. Mm-hmm. He mentioned that. He said, guys, there's not a day that will go by. If you commit, you stay here with me. There's not a day that will go by that I will not remind you of the ultimate goal. So guys, our ultimate goal is to win a national championship. There's a lot of stuff between there we got to get to. Got to get to know each other, right? You got to get to know the plan. You got to help me build the plan. But the ultimate goal is to get there. One of our first practices with him, we're all warmed up. The assistant coaches get us warmed up, and he walks in with this ladder. And he puts the ladder underneath the hoop, brings a stack of nets, and he has these gold scissors that he keeps on his desk. And he looks at us and he said, guys, come here. All we're going to do today for the next hour and a half is we're going to practice cutting down the nets. Come on, bro. Who does that? And we're looking at each other like, he said, yeah, we're going to practice cutting down the nets, and that's all we're going to do today. He said, Thurl, you go up first. Everybody will follow you. I'll go up last. I'll cut the last piece down. I'll put the net around my neck, and you guys are going to pick me up and carry me around this 12,000 seat arena like we just won the national championship. Awkward. It was so awkward. I can't even describe that awkwardness that we all felt because we had no real reference of what that was supposed to be like. And so he's trying to explain to us, guys, look, if we want to win the national championship, we first of all, we got to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, we have to visualize it. We have to visualize if that happened, what's the first thing you do? How would you celebrate? Put that in your mind when we're doing this twice a month.
You did it twice a month?
Twice a month.
Wow.
And the third, fourth time were just as awkward almost. But I think as we got into it more, we start to feel it. I mean, I think around the fifth or sixth time we were throwing V up in the air and catching them. Guys were running around up and down the stairs, yelling and screaming like they had just won the championship. There were students poking their head in the door like, what's going on in there? You go back and look at any of the photos from that championship day, you'll see two guys standing on the basket, Ozell McQueen and Ernie Myers. They're up on top of the 10-foot rim. And people always wonder how they got up there so fast. They practiced it. True story.
That's incredible.
They practiced climbing that thing, and they were trying to race each other to see who could get up there the fastest, and they would help the other one up. And so that is the kind of leader that we got to know. Someone who was different for that time. Someone who was very unorthodox, but you knew he meant it.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who took the time to understand each member of the team because you couldn't coach each one exactly the same. And there were some guys like myself, you didn't need to scream and yell, just tell me what you want. I'll go out and do it. There were guys who just could not really get through things unless you were forceful and you yelled at them, not in a demeaning way, but a way to get them charged up because that was their trigger point. He was a master. He was a master at it. Of course, in 1983, when we made it to the championship game against Hakeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler. I mean, that was like an NBA team masquerading as college players.
Yeah, literally, they became an NBA team.
Yeah. And so, the rest is history, but that dunk goes down and we win that championship. Crowd rushes the floor. And it's like, I knew exactly what to do.
You know what's fascinating about that is Jimmy seemed to not know what to do.
That's right.
Isn't that interesting? Like
right.
He had practiced for so long. And then when you guys won, the iconic image of that is him kind of running around.
It is.
Kind of not knowing what to do.
Where do I go? I'm trying to find somebody to hug. And then I think he ended up jumping on a pile of cheerleaders or something. But it was amazing too when the dust kind of settled and the NCAA guy came over with a little box. He opened it up, a pair of scissors. And then V just kind of stopped him in his tracks, reached in his pocket. He pulled out those gold scissors that we practiced with.
Oh my God.
You're kidding me, man. And I think we just kind of, for a second, we just couldn't believe what this man had built us into. And he talked about it, right? And it's not very often, because you got to have some luck along the way, especially in sports. Things have to fall in the right places. But, he talked about, well, you can only control what you can control. We just have to get there. We just have to, he used to say this a lot, put yourself in a position to win. Not going to win them all. But along with coaching, along with believing in the system, you put yourself in a position to win more times than not. You're going to find a way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, he was an amazing man. Of course, 10 years later, he passes away. Cancer.
What was that loss like for you?
Mm. It was very difficult for me, for a lot of guys, but I can only speak internally for myself. I couldn't even go to his funeral. I just did not want to ever remember him. And I wanted to remember him like I wanted to. The last time I saw him was the 10th anniversary of our championship in Reynolds Coliseum at North Carolina State on campus. And he walks in, his body's frail. And I'm the last person in that line of players that he would get to as he enters the arena. And he gets to me, he hugs everybody, he gets to me, and he steps up on a chair. And he puts his arms around me and he says, I love you, Thurl. Thank you for everything. I love you, Coach. And I knew, I think I knew at that time, that was the last time that I was ever going to get to hug him and speak to him. Not too long after that, he showed up on the ESPYs. And if you've never heard that speech, it is really one for the ages.
Yeah, one of the greatest speeches ever.
Oh, my goodness. And that was the man who was in my life for three magnificent years. And so, when you talk about leadership and the ultimate goal is to be a champion, I don't care what arena you're in, that's always the ultimate goal, is to be a champion, to champion something. And he was the epitome of that. And his legacy, listen, the Jimmy V Foundation, he's left an amazing legacy with his family and with his fight. Because honestly, I thought he would beat it.
Yeah.
If anybody could beat cancer, it's Jimmy. And so, yeah, he was the ultimate warrior, the ultimate leader, the guy who just ingrained so much in you that even years after his passing, you're teaching it to your kids and your grandkids. Because it's a party. It's a party. That's what great leaders are.
Yeah, he is a sports icon among icons. There's no question about that. Then you get to the NBA and you play with the Jazz, one of the greatest coaches of all time. He doesn't get mentioned as much as he should, but Jerry Sloan was an incredible coach.
He was.
Was he your coach when you got there?
No, Frank Layden drafted me.
I was going to say, yeah, so it was Layden. And then almost immediately, kind of like your college thing, when did Layden leave? Year 1 or 2?
It was year 2.
2.
Yep.
And then Jerry comes in. What was that like? First time meeting Jerry?
Well, first of all, Frank was an amazing leader himself. I was fortunate to transition.
Frank is incredible.
To transition from Jimmy to Frank. And Frank doesn't get enough credit for his coaching, but Frank was just more than that. He was the perfect guy for the perfect time for the Jazz, because the Jazz weren't getting people at the games. They just were not. And the franchise was in trouble financially. And you probably heard the joke about, and I don't even think it was a joke, people calling Frank to ask him what time the game was. And he said, "What time can you be there?" Right. But it was that bad. I was really the first major draft pick. Actually, Darrell Griffith was the first, and I was the second. But Frank was the kind of guy who, he was good with the X's and O's, but he was even better with you as a person. He was better with you in grim times to get you to understand that it's important what you do, but it's not the most important thing. I remember driving in LA after Lakers just kicked our butts. We're on the bus and it's quiet. We drive by this whole sidewalk full of homeless people. Frank stands up and he said, "Guys, it's just a game." He says, "It's important to all of us, but I want you to look out your window. Look out your window." And so once he did that, the message was clear. Let this one go. Got another game coming. We're in a great position as players. We're playing in the best league in the world. And yeah, we losing sucks, but there's worse things. Frank was amazing. And he still is that way, in his 90s. Jerry came aboard. Of course, Frank hired him. And would have had to have been an idiot not knowing the history of the player Jerry Sloan was.
Yeah, the original Bull.
Yes, the original Bull. And so, his reputation really preceded him. We had never had him in that position before, but even as an assistant coach, we didn't treat him like one. The guy was a legend. So we knew he was full of knowledge. We knew, first of all, he was full of playing knowledge. The game hadn't changed that much. Team needed an identity. And it was a physical game back then. So who better to talk about the physicality of the game than a guy like Jerry Sloan? He was the ultimate physical player. And so when he took over the team, it was such an easy transition for us as players, because we knew he had what it took. Frank knew he had what it took, and it was his time. And so that was just another incredible attribute of Frank, right? Knowing that the time has come for me to pass the baton on to someone who could really take this team to the next level.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, actually. And Frank would stay in the front office for a while. Then
he would, but he knew he wasn't going to be the guy to lead this team to the next level. That's not easy for a leader to do, right? And so Jerry was the kind of guy who would always, he was tough-nosed when you saw him doing his job, but he had a big heart. If you could ever get close to Jerry, he was humorous. He was country boy. He had all these sayings, but he had expectations of you. Never be late and come to work. You put that uniform on. I don't care what's wrong with you. You put that uniform on. You better be ready to work. So there was no, our practices were rough, man. And they were physical, but we loved it, And Jerry was always the kind of guy who was smart enough to know he didn't know everything. So he put people around him like Phil Johnson.
Yeah, Phil, another legend.
Yeah, you don't get one without the other, right? I mean, people talk about Jerry, but Phil to me was just as important. Because Phil was a coach of the year at one point. And again, what do great leaders do? They find other people who can make them better. Jerry wasn't afraid of that. He wasn't afraid to say, Phil, take over the offense. What do you think, Phil? Right in front of us, right? And so that was, I think, was Jerry's biggest strength, was that he surrounded himself with the right people, and he never took all the credit.
Yeah. And I still think of, when Jerry quit or left, Phil doing the same thing. Because Phil could have been the head coach.
Yeah.
Obviously.
That's the ultimate
That's like the
almost.
obvious thing.
Yeah.
And for Phil to be like, that, man, not even knowing them, I was like, whoa, that is insane. That's just the loyalty there, the love that must be there, the kind of brothers that they must have been in order to do that is just unbelievable. He seemed really intense. I mean, he tried to fight players.
Yeah, I was there for a lot of those.
He seemed really intense. What did that feel like? Like he always had the team's back no matter what, to the point like he'd put himself in there.
That's right. Always. And that's who he was, though. That's who he was before basketball. That's part of his personality was that never quit, never give up attitude, do your work. He always used to talk about, putting the hard hat on and carrying the lunchbox to work. And that is really how he approached things. That was the simplicity of it for him. Just go out and work harder than the other team. Go out and let them know you're there. Maybe you won't win them all, but when they leave, they're going to know that the next time we meet is going to be different. And so, I was in the locker room when he got into, wasn't afraid to call out anyone.
Yeah.
Your stars.
Wasn't it like Dennis Rodman or like it was something crazy that he was, he wanted to fight or he was trying to, or
he always wanted to fight on the opposing team. If anything started up, I mean, I don't know how many times Phil Johnson had to hold him back. But yeah, Dennis was one of those guys from the opposing team. But even on our own teams in the locker room, if guys disagree with him and trying to show some attitude, he'd be the first one to say, "Hey, come on, let's go, let's go." But when it was over, Jerry was cool. Jerry was like, "We okay?" And he was just so great at it. He's like, "Okay, let's get to work." It didn't matter who it was. Could be Carl, could be John. You weren't above, Jerry Sloan's teaching methods. And they weren't always that way, but that was part of him. That was part of what made him so great. That was the stamp of his teams, the toughness that you would get that trickled down from him and his teaching. And for a long time, the only jersey retired for the Chicago Bulls hanging up in the rafters was Jerry Sloan's. That says a lot.
Oh my. It absolutely says a lot. And then he meets those same Bulls in the finals twice. And unfortunately, it's the greatest player ever you're going up against. But what did you make of like that team, those runs? And I mean, speaking of leadership, you've got two of the greatest players of all time on those teams, and Stockton and Malone, and those were crazy times. Like that was the greatest time to be in Utah.
It was, and unfortunately, I wasn't on the team in those years. I'd been traded, obviously.
Yeah. Were you watching from like?
I was in the stands.
Oh,
because my season overseas was over. It ended. So I would come back and go to the games because I was still really good friends with those guys and wanted to see them do well. But yeah, those were just intense moments. And it really speaks to the fact that there are certain things that probably will never happen again.
Mm-hmm.
To have two guys like Carl and John have the tenure they had with the Jazz on one team. Carl did, he did have a short stint with the Lakers, but for that duo to be together, I'm going to say that trio because you have to put Jerry Sloan in that mix as well.
Absolutely.
One, it says something about the Millers and their loyalty, right? Because
I agree with that. It's so incredible.
Yeah. And the other thing it says is that if something ain't broke, then you can't mess with it that much. Now you got to tweak it here and there, put some pieces around it. But the Stockton to Malone duo was so powerful. It was so powerful that teams knew what was coming and just couldn't stop it.
Yeah, nuts.
Right? I mean, the perfect example of the pick and roll, it's coming. I don't care what you do. More times than not, it's going to be effective. And so, I caught John. John came in the year after I did, Carl 2 years. So I got to watch them grow into their roles and the players they would become. But those years, especially for Utah, especially for this market,
it's
just unbelievable.
Maybe the most memorable shot of all time, unfortunately, happened.
It did. But again, you're talking about in my eyes, and obviously in yours, the greatest player that ever played, Michael Jordan.
Yeah, what do you think of that debate? And not that we have to go into it because that's what all podcasts delve into.
Yeah.
I don't even think it's a debate. It's like close.
Yeah, I'm not even big on debating it as much as looking at each player and what they brought. Now, they both win. Both have won championship. But they both played in different eras. And I always look at Michael as saying, look, the impact, Michael didn't really need to. I don't think Scottie Pippen's one of the top 50 players without Michael.
Yeah.
I don't think you could put Scottie Pippen on another team or without Michael and say, hey, go win it for us. Michael Jordan, as tough as he may have been on his teammates and everything you hear and see, he didn't want to lose. He wanted to. He found anything he could to motivate himself and his team to win. And not that LeBron doesn't do that, but I just think Michael changed the scope of a guy who could just command greatness.
Yeah, his intensity is like bar none.
Yeah.
Is the closest you've ever seen Kobe, would you say? That kind of the closest so. In terms of that ethic and
yeah, no question.
Yeah.
And not only affect the game itself, but things outside the game. Business acumen, right? With Nike and what that's still doing.
I'm wearing Jordans right now. It's crazy.
So am I.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know if the debate will still go on because a lot of the younger generation never saw Michael play. You know, we've seen both.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Michael put it, probably the best I've heard it is, don't compare players, compare teams.
Yeah.
Right? Those Bulls teams were some of the greatest teams ever. And you pull Michael out of that equation, right? He didn't go out recruiting other guys, other high-profile guys to come play with him.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it was a different era. Like players couldn't do that. Now players run the league, right? In a lot of sense. But I mean, he retired because he was sick of management. And same with Phil and Jackson's. Like it was over only because of management. If you watch The Last Dance, you're like, they could have gone another 2, 3, 4, but it was just because of they disagreed with management, which is insane. That would never happen today.
That's right.
You know, like Michael Jordan would run the team for as long as he wanted to run it, right? Like every team LeBron's on, he runs, right? In an interesting way. And Kobe's same thing. It's been like that for a while now. But yeah, back then it was, you know, the players didn't have that type of sway.
Not that much, no. And look, I'm not taking anything away from LeBron. The guy's 40 years old and still doing it like no other has done.
Oh, the longevity.
Yeah. But, you know, I'm more favorable to my era, having seen both now. And they both will go down as two of the greatest players ever in history and two of the greatest leaders.
Yeah. What do you think? Why do you think NBA ratings are down?
I think there's a lot of reasons. I think in a lot of ways, the product isn't as great. The product is young.
Mm-hmm.
The product is unproven. And even a lot of the great ones, there's this age of player management where, you know, they think this 82 game season's too long. I think the fans are a little bit jaded when they pay a high price for a ticket and, you know, their favorite player's not playing tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And listen, a lot of it's legit. Players get hurt in this league and they want to be 100% before they get back out there. But I think a lot of it too is, for me, not even directly related to the NBA as much as it happens before the NBA. College is different.
Yeah, it's so different.
Right?
They're making money now.
A lot.
And they can go wherever they want every year.
Yep. And so I think some of it's that. I mean, there's a lot of great talent out there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a battle for that talent every single season. in the lottery, of course, and there's always these sleepers that come along and become great players. But I think fans are, and look, there's other entertainment too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Football is doing great. Hockey is making their run. Baseball. So there's competing things, but I don't know. I think there's certain things that fans want that they feel like they're not getting.
I wonder if some of it, I wonder if some of it is like, it's not entirely clear that anyone's trying to achieve something. You know, like the Jordan years and the and Kobe years, like, oh, he's trying to get one more than Shaq. There's like I'm not even sure, like, if you're just an NBA fan, like, what do you want to see this year? Like Curry get another one? I don't know. Like,
That's
you know,
true.
it's not like entirely clear. And they're all like really good friends.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that feels off. Yeah. Cause like it didn't seem like, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we were good friends away from the game.
Yeah.
But Jerry hated when we were fraternizing. If we were fraternizing during the game, he didn't want to see it.
Yeah.
Right. This is business, not personal. You can go out to dinner afterwards.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing too is that, you have Adam Silver trying to get creative, right? Trying to get these guys to compete.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of money out there. Players are making it. Now you got to go and earn it and compete night after night. What can we do? Play in tournament. Okay. Okay, I see that. It's given teams that may not have had a chance to go for a ring to get into the playoffs. Mid-season tournament. Jury's still kind of out on that.
Yeah.
All-Star weekend, trying to give the fans something different. So they're trying. Yeah, I just think that 82 game season, it's
probably too long, right?
Well, for me, no. I mean, that's all I knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all we knew. I mean, it's 82 games. It's better than flying commercial like we did. Every team is charter, right? You've got the best chefs. You've got the best trainers and people that take care of you when you travel to help you recover. So yeah, for me, it's difficult sometimes because I get in my time machine and look at how it used to be, and it was great back then, and now it's so I don't think the game's in trouble at all. I think you've got some fans that are just maybe kind of fed up at very high priced athletes complaining a lot. The game has changed, right?
The complaining after every call is interesting, and I'm sure that happened before, but now it just seems like insane. It does kind of feel like there's some, you mentioned something interesting. There does seem to be some tension between players and fans.
Yeah. I think
really interesting.
It is interesting. And look, there's some great teams doing great things, and great teams like the Jazz have an amazing following, even in even in a tough season, right? They're still filling the arena because they get it. They understand. They just want to see a team go out and give it their best every single night. But ticket prices are going up as well. And some of it has to do maybe with the economy, and you've got a lot of fans at home watching that are just maybe not pleased with the product or not pleased with, really good athletes deciding when they're going to play. So, yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the numbers, the game really is as strong as ever. Maybe the fan viewership is down a bit, but the game is global now.
Yeah,
it's international, and I think it's going to stay on an upward swing.
Aside from the ones we've mentioned, what other leaders come to mind when you think of great leadership, great leaders?
Well, I think whatever arena you end up in, of course, I was in that sports arena for a long time. It's what got me off the streets of DC. My parents were amazing leaders, and I probably don't talk about them enough because of where I've moved on to in the corporate world and in the sports world. my parents have passed away, but some of the best lessons in leadership, I think, that I could have ever received were from two African American parents that gave up everything, picking tobacco in the hot summers in North Carolina, and making very little for it, having two kids and one in tow, which was me, and deciding one day they couldn't feed their family with the pay they were getting, and decided to pack everything up and move north to Washington, D.C. Right? I mean, if you understand history, you know what was going on in Black America at that time.
Absolutely.
And so it was a risk for them to just say, we got to go, we got to move. This just isn't not going to work. So they moved to D.C. and April 7th, 61, I was born. And as I got older and became of age to understand what was going on around me, it was because of them I knew. I knew when they went to the March on Washington and Martin Luther King's speech, I knew that when they came home, they would sit us down and talk to us about everything that was going on around us. I knew that when they went to a protest and the dogs were sicked on my dad and other people, that they would come home and talk to us about how to treat other people. And it wasn't what most would think, right? They never came home angry. They came home trying to tell us how we could make it in a world that seemed to be against us. How we could get a great education. Because if you watch Remember the Titans and you remember the school parts when the parents were there, the white parents were there with the signs, Bladensburg High School wasn't too far from that. It was all DMV. And so those are the kind of things we had to go through. But a great leader, or great parents, they teach you how to deal with those things. And it doesn't work out all the time. And it's hard sometimes because the way they tell you to handle things isn't your first reaction. You want to fight. Right? You want to protect yourself. You want to take the first punch sometimes when somebody calls you the N-word, tells you to go back to Africa. There was a lot of that going on. That's not how we were raised. That's not how the leaders in my family taught us to be. They taught us to fight for what we believed in and to protect ourselves. But we were to treat people like we wanted to be treated. And so those two were tremendous in leadership upbringing with all of us. And so I'd have to start there, obviously. And then it really was a sense of the village raising kids. Because when my parents were away, I had neighbors who were kind of the watchdogs. They knew what we were doing, where we were when we came home. But yeah, and then as I got older and had a chance to be a part of a collective, I learned what it meant to lead a group of people. I learned what it meant to have a coach designate you as a leader when he wasn't around, when we were at our dorms and mischief was going on. We learned how to bring those guys into the fold and say, look, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and we can't do it if this is going to happen. If you're thinking about doing this, it's going to keep us from what we all really want. And so I really learned the characteristics of what leaders try to provide their teams. And then moving on after my career, to start my own business, to go to dinner with guys like Bill Childs, R.C. Willey, who has an amazing story, to have a chance to sit down with guys like Larry Miller and talk things other than basketball, and Gail as well. So I've had a lot of opportunities in my position to be able to take the things that I've learned from being a champion, right? The ultimate goal into every single phase of my life, my personal life as a father and a husband, right? Your family is, you're going to disagree. Your team is your family on the basketball court. You've got a family at home. You're raising kids. You're not going to agree all the time. How do you handle those moments? And so, yeah, I've been very fortunate to have some great leadership around me.
And you're working on something now around this very topic, right? And tell us what you're working on. I find it so fascinating.
Well, I think when you think about any arena, whether it's corporate or sports or what have you, philanthropy, the ultimate success depends on effective leadership, right? Effective leadership. Leadership comes in different forms and fashions, but how effective can you make it? How can I convince you, first of all, that this idea that I have is a great one? I want you to help me build it. I want to find the people who can see what I'm seeing, as V used to say, and dream what I'm dreaming, and then add their own pieces, add their own brushstrokes, and build it into something that is meaningful to people. So I think all great leaders have certain things in common, and one of those is being service-oriented. Because at some point, it really isn't about you. It's about what you can bring to someone else, whether it's a product, whether it's, something that you can't touch and feel. It's a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Champion's Edge, which is this event coming up in March, was really derived from a championship standpoint. Everybody, you ask anybody, would you like to be a champion in something? And it's not necessarily sports.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody would say, yeah, I would, because it means that you have reached the pinnacle in your arena at what you do. And that is not going to be done alone. So leadership is where it starts for me. And I wanted to have this leadership conference, make it, a full day of great leaders coming and business minds, people getting into a room, if you will. It's going to be at Delta Center, but people getting in the room and talking to each other and swapping ideas and understanding what it takes to get to that next level of leadership. And so there's probably no place better to do it than an arena.
Yeah, I love that.
And so we have just some amazing people. Dan Clark, who's a world-renowned speaker, is going to be starting things. I'm actually going to be starting things off, doing some storytelling and talking about some of the things we talked about. But yeah, I'm looking forward to putting this all together. It's coming together really well, March 18th at Delta Center. And I just want to bring people together. I mean, I think it's just a great way to not just socialize, but also pick each other's brains and learn some things along the way.
That's incredible. Well, can I just say thank you on behalf of all Utahns for the ambassador you are of this state and who you are to this community. You've been a part of my life since I've been here because I've been a Jazz fan following it. And so just watching you and seeing what you do in this community and what you mean to the people, seeing you at Jazz games and the way fans still interact with you and come up to you. And, it's remarkable. So thank you for everything you've done for Utah, really.
I appreciate it. Well, Utah's been so good to me, man. And I can't think of any other place I'd love to call home. Wherever I go other places, but Utah's always a good place. I always say to come back and exhale after my busy travels. But yeah, I mean, it's a great place to be. And, it's on the map now. I mean, people know.
For better or worse, right?
Yeah, for better or worse. It really is true.
Here we are.
Yeah. And I think, I've been here over 30 years now. And it's just been great for me and my family and my businesses to be able to be here and thrive. And it's a great place.
Thank you so much for coming on. And we'll make sure to promote the event and put that in the show notes and all that type of stuff so that people know. But
Thank
what an
you.
honor to have you. Seriously, thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having me, man. Appreciate it.